Martin, the Argentina holdout saga has pitted hedge funds against the country, investors who have taken a restructuring against those who have avoided it for many years, and not least those who understand what pari passu means and those who don't understand Latin. However, in your column last week, you made the claim that Argentina should be defended from the vultures. I took a slightly more nihilistic position, which is that the system of sovereign immunity and sovereign debt restructuring overall is the big problem here, not so much the holdouts.
Well, I agree, actually. I'm sorry about this. I know we disagree violently, but that, I think, is the core problem. A sovereign debtor is a very strange entity because you cannot put it through a bankruptcy process in the normal way because it's sovereign. That's what it means to be sovereign. So it's very difficult to force it to pay. You can, but it's very hard. And on the other hand, it's almost impossible to work out a way of restructuring the debt smoothly. So this is a process that has gone on for essentially 12 years. Actually slightly longer. So it's an incredibly long process. So I think the most important thing is to have a process that makes possible renegotiation of the debt on not ludicrously easy terms for the debtor, because that destroys the whole market, and at the same time makes it possible so this doesn't go on forever.
Two comebacks there. First of all, the holdouts, the bond over which they are suing, Argentina submitted to New York law jurisdiction, it waived its sovereign immunity, and the pari passu clause in question for equal treatment did not exclude this rateable payment alongside restructured holders. So one of my big problems here is bond investors do not read contracts, and whatever comes next in the policy response to this case, are we really going to get any better response from investors who are actually reading what they're investing in?
We cannot save fools from making bad decisions, and lending to sovereigns in foreign currency they can print, has a very, very long history, which includes immense number of defaults, and any lender, by and large, tends to get a slightly higher interest rate, has to accept that means that from time to time they're going to lose money.
It's something to bear in mind for those who are lending to Ecuador at 8% currently with its new bond. It's defaulted 10 times in the last 2 centuries.
Yes,
but I wanted to interrogate
indeed.
you on official sector lenders and whether they're fools, because at the moment, with the European Central Bank in Greece and the Paris Club more recently in Argentina, they have received full payment for taking on a great amount of risk. Is this really fair if we're asking investors to pay more attention to who they're lending to? Shouldn't the official sector also bear some of that risk?
Well, I'm perfectly happy to accept that they should be senior, but that should be clear. But of course they must bear risk. Indeed, I can see situations, Greece is the most obvious now, where the private creditors are mostly gone. I think that debt is going to have to be written down in some form. There are ways of doing it which might conceal it, but since the public sector is the creditor, it's likely to lose money. I would really try to preserve the IMF's position, because it is a distressed lender. Just to come back to the private sector thing, another thing we should be looking at is the way these instruments should change, and one of them is to have instruments that aren't so inflexible. GDP-linked bonds are a possibility. That's something that actually allows, as it were, automatic adjustment of the value of the bond to economic circumstances. Export-linked bonds, one could imagine as well. I think the biggest problem in our whole economy, this is way beyond this, is we've got far too much debt, and debt is an incredibly inflexible contract, as the Bank for International Settlements has just pointed out this morning.
I would agree on that, this idea of contingent clauses in sovereign debt, because I think the issue has been simply the holdouts are just simply arbitraging what exists in contracts already. If you redesign contracts, and you can include anti-holdout provisions as well, a lot will improve. However, one big issue for private sector lenders is when a restructuring has to happen, is the data and is the official sector response in terms of the debt sustainability analysis and whatever else is required, can that be trusted? And I think we saw in Greece, it was less than trustworthy. And I think that will be a key point of contract reform, actually making sure the official sector does provide the right data.
Transparency is incredibly important. I accept that absolutely, and I think fairness of treatment is important. The governments do have to accept that they're part of this. When it gets completely out of hand, they're going to have to lose money as well, and that is life. Generally, I think that on the sovereign side, countries should be borrowing in their own currencies if at all possible. And I even have the sort of rule that if a country can't borrow in its own currency, it probably shouldn't be borrowing at all, because it basically shows this is not a solvent country, and solvent countries shouldn't be allowed to borrow. But then they do, because there are creditors willing to lend.
We may see that shift in future after this case, and I think that's a good point on which to end. Thank you, Martin.
Pleasure.